Western Australia is a land of vast distances and harsh beauty, from scorching deserts to remote and isolated coastlines. It's a place that can challenge even the most experienced adventurer. With the growing popularity of four-wheel driving, more and more of us are heading off the beaten track. But sometimes, even with the best preparation, things can go wrong, and a simple day out can quickly turn into a fight for survival. Welcome to RAC's Horizons podcast. I'm Mike Bartlett. In this episode, we're asking, how do you prepare yourself for the unexpected when you're out in the bush? And what should you do if you find yourself stranded or lost? To help us answer these questions, I'm joined by Terry Hewett, a former Special Forces soldier and Order of Australia Medal recipient. Terry spends about 9 months of the year in some of the world's toughest environments, including the Kimberley and the jungles of Papua New Guinea, leading treks and teaching survival skills. Terry, thank you for joining us.
Fabulous to be here.
I'm more of a glamper than a camper.
Yeah.
You spend about 9 months of the year in some of the wildest places around here, the Kimberley, the jungles of the PNG. What keeps drawing you back to those extreme places?
It's the outdoors and it's the wilderness, and it's there's a draw to be in these remote locations for what it does for your soul and the way it stimulates you to keep you I suppose energized in life.
What is it about remote places that stimulates your soul?
Well, there's not a lot of people there.
Right.
To break that urban cocoon that we live in, is for me, it's important. I enjoy the urban environment, but for short periods of time. But I feel very relaxed and comfortable in a remote location, and be that with small groups of people or going solos. You know, I've walked up to 200 kilometres on my own in wilderness environments and enjoy that space.
Okay. Is there something, I absolutely hear what you're saying about getting outside our urban bubble, getting away from all of the cares and concerns that can consume us, I suppose. But is there something about the extreme nature itself, the walking 200 kilometres or the being somewhere that very few people go? Is that part of the appeal?
Look, it definitely is, but I will come back to, there is a little bit of ego with regards to satisfying a question in your own mind about how I can do that. I read a lot in history, and sometimes I think I was born 200 years too late, you know.
Why is that?
Well, because of I suppose the adventure that people would have had back then with the raw basics of, when you look at all the technology we have today, we've got everything in our favour today, and the globe is known. It's so well known. We're back 300-400 years ago. There was, for a lot of, if you take the European type individuals out there was a real adventure at getting on the frontier and exploring something of discovery, where now my discovery is understanding myself in that environment more.
Interesting. So you would have liked to be a great explorer in the globe, but you're happy to explore inwardly as well.
Oh, look, you've got to understand self. You've got to understand self, because that's the reality, that when you do go to this space, you understand your own limitations. But if you don't fully understand yourself, you can go into this place with a false understanding and poor preparation.
I think that's something we'll come back to, because I suspect that is where people get into trouble. They don't understand their own limitations and they perhaps aren't prepared. But let's do a quick snapshot of your background. What led you from being a Special Forces soldier to a survival instructor?
Well, I grew up as a child in the bush, and that was in the forest down south in the Karri forest initially. But then my father went into the Pilbara in the 1960s, and so as a child we sort of went off into that environment with my father, who was a prospector. So I got really close to a lot of Indigenous people at a very early age in remote areas, and you just didn't know what you were learning from these people at the time, because it was just something that just morphed across the, morphed in the environment that you absorb, where nowadays so much of the material that we learn is structured and there's a syllabus. Back then, there was no syllabus. It was just, you just absorbed it, so you didn't know what you were learning at the time.
So it's very practical kind of learning that you you were picking up from Australia's First Nations people.
Yeah, First Nations and especially older people. Like
Right.
at the time, a lot of younger people don't have they might have a bit of disregard, not so much respect for older people, but I learned very quickly that, some of these old folks, especially old cattlemen and Aboriginal elders and that, what they had to share, there was an enormous amount of wisdom. And I suppose the modern wisdom nowadays comes from podcasts and
Just like this.
Yeah, just like
Yes,
this.
we're spreading our wisdom around.
Yeah.
What was some of the wisdom that you picked up at that early stage from those elders?
There was as I said, it's not a structured sort of thing like the 10 Commandments, but just the calmness and the quietness of how they moved in that environment and shared things in that environment. There was no rush. There was no intensity to be here, be there, be there. It was just, you just moved through the environment. So it was calming.
And possibly character defining for you, I suspect.
Well, as a young child coming into my teens, yeah, you noted it, but it wasn't until you got to your early 20s when you felt like you're a bit of a bull at the gate, want to have a go at everything, that you started to reflect on some of these conversations and people you had time with, and all these things started to drop into place that you didn't pick up at that time in your life. But now, as a young adult, especially when I was in the military and you're starting to test yourself, these voices would come back and you'd recall lots of little things that just help consolidate for you the lessons that you thought you absorbed, but you only got part of it.
Interesting. And what led you from there to the military?
Look, yeah, it was a family side of things, generations that had served.
You're from a military family?
Yeah, well, not everyone, but my grandfather and on my both sides, and on my mother's side, a number of those were killed in the Second World War. So I was just drawn to that. But I will say, if I was to be truly honest, I wanted to test myself, and then realised it's the most obscene thing, conflict, and it's an obscene thing of what human beings want to do to each other. And yet, when you're young, you want to test yourself and you think, hey, this is not the way we should be doing things.
Okay. And you moved from the military then to becoming an instructor, I guess sharing some of that knowledge that you'd picked up along the way, some of the skills you'd developed. What was it about teaching that appealed to you?
Well, when you leave the military, I decided, okay, I'd had enough. I'd done 12 years and, you see a few things and you think, right, I'm going to move on. And you do a bit of an inventory of your skill set. Now, I had done a trade as a motor mechanic before I went into the Army. And then I thought, well, most of my skills are quite destructive because they were at the tip of the spear type work that you were doing. So I looked at it and thought, well, here's this civilian world, and I could see in Europe and America there was this developing outdoor structure that was coming for education and experience for people who were becoming more urbanised. So I looked at that and thought, okay, I've got these skills that are all in the outdoors and those sorts of things, so I'll develop a business. So I went into developing my own business, which started November 41 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been teaching for 41 years now.
Yeah, I've been sharing what skills I have, for 41 years.
Okay. Talking about those skills, you talk a lot about bushcraft.
Yeah.
That's the word, isn't it? Which is something that is distinctive from survival skills. What do you mean by bushcraft? How does it differ from traditional survival training?
Well, survival, if you take the stuff that we see on TV now, survival, it's dramatised, it's taken to extremes. When all the older blokes and women, if I take, especially Aboriginal women, they had bushcraft. And bushcraft means you don't get into a survival situation.
Right. So it's avoiding the trouble in the first place.
Yeah, bushcraft prepares you to move and operate in that environment. So you've got these bushcraft skills. Now, survival is when it all goes wrong, and that's because you just don't have this knowledge and awareness to actually prevent the risk or the survival situation developing. So yeah, I lean towards bushcraft where you learn these skills to avoid survival.
Okay. Where did that word come from, bushcraft?
I'd probably be drawn more towards the military because they have manuals and PAMs and stuff like that, pamphlets and that are about bushcraft, because I suppose in bushcraft, your skill of camouflage and concealment and moving around is as effective as firepower.
Okay.
So yeah.
So it's kind of a fusion of that wisdom you inherited from elders and cattlemen and your experience in the military.
Yeah, well, people can walk through the bush. I struggle when I'm walking with people, the amount of noise they make, and we just scare everything away.
Yeah.
So when I've moved through the bush, I've had dingoes come within, 5-10 metres of me because you're just moving quietly, and huge goannas, that come up to you and stuff like that, and birds flying around you. Bushcraft is about being in the bush but not disturbing the environment, and you become part of that environment. So you understand how it works, and you work it in your favour so that you can really enjoy the place. And you're actually not creating any risk for yourself. You're just a part of that environment.
Okay. So is it fair to say it's more of a mindset than a simple set of skills?
Well, it's having the right mindset that then enables you to develop and hone skills so that you're very comfortable, capable. You go out there and you come back and you just don't have an incident, Yeah.
I suppose if you're thinking about bushcraft, being a sort of a mindset, a way of approaching your time in the wilderness, how do you start teaching that? It sounds, I can understand the idea of it sort of as a big theory, but how do you get the specifics in there? What's the first step to becoming adept at bushcraft?
The first thing that I find is you've got to stimulate in the person an interest by giving them a really quick skill that they acquire, and then they develop a passion. And that passion moves them into that space that I can only teach so much. You start the process. Now, what I was initially taught, I then took on and accumulated more and more knowledge and information that I have. So what I generally find, I can get people with a pocket knife, a piece of cord, a few bits of timber, and I can get people with a friction method to light a fire within about an hour. And they go, wow, that's amazing. But if I then left them, they'd probably take 2 weeks to create that fire again, because I'm guiding them through so many different things that they don't know.
Right.
But you've sparked within them, wow, I've just done that. How do I do that again? And then away they go to learning themselves. So you pick up a couple of little things, give them this inspiration, and then they take it to that next level.
Okay, so you start with a simple skill like fire building. You are literally
fire lighting, yeah.
Literally and metaphorically starting a fire in these people. And then through the skills, the bushcraft is the kind of wisdom they gather around those skills. Yeah,
well, when I take people on treks, and that's the thing, you've got to immerse yourself for a period of time. So when you take people on treks from the time you go to sleep, even during the night, you're listening to the night and things are going on. Well, people initially, they just crash and die and wake up in the morning and they don't know I'm always conscious of what's going on, but they're learning all the time if they're aware.
Right.
Yeah.
It'd be good to talk a bit about the specifics, I guess, of being out in the WA landscape. It's obviously a stunning landscape, but often unforgiving. From your perspective, what makes survival in WA different to other parts of the world?
Western Australia is one of the most unique land masses in the world. It is vast, it's got variety, and it's got very few people. And that in itself positions us in a really unique way for these outdoor adventures to go into that space. But there's a risk with that because it's so vast and it's so different, and there's so few.
Okay.
That you've got to approach it with that understanding that you're in a unique place in the world because of what we've got here.
Okay. And that there may not be anyone around to help you if you
Yeah.
get lost. Let's go into some more specifics now. What should you do if you have become lost? What's the first step in addressing your situation?
Before we get into that situation, the military I suppose, coined a phrase for me, is the 7P principle. Now, it can have an expletive in it, but you can moderate that. But it's prior preparation and planning prevents a pathetically poor performance.
Pathetically poor. Okay.
Yeah. Pathetic is yeah. Well, it's a very soft. expletive.
Yes. No.
But the thing is, it's about before you go, you really need to research the environment you're going into. A lot of people may have gone into the southwest, then they go, we're going off into the Pilbara.
Right.
But you're roaring off into the Pilbara, let's say coming up November, December, very hot, wet, cooler environment down south. So it's about understanding that environment, researching that environment so that you've got an appreciation, okay, therefore, how do I prepare? Am I going in a vehicle? And it might be to a certain point. Then am I getting out of that vehicle? Am I walking for how many days? Or what am I walking? Or how far am I walking over what terrain? So once you start asking yourself all those questions, and too many people don't ask enough questions, do their research in their preparation, because then that helps you put in place all those small elements so you don't have to be rescued. I remember reading some stuff when I first started my business back in the 1980s, that in America, when the mobile phone first came into use, a lot of people just park their vehicle, go off in the Sierra Nevadas, go walking in the mountains, and they've got the mobile phone, and when they got in trouble, they ring up and a helicopter have to come and get them out. And then emergency services said, well, that's going to be $10,000 a go now.
Right.
Because people had this very simple, drive the car, go there, I'm going to go for a walk, the weather changes, oh, we're not ready. We don't have a little backpack, don't have stuff.
Yep.
And then they just jump on the mobile phone. So emergency services had to change how they operated because they were just being called out all the time.
So that's a very city slicker approach, really, isn't it? There's a sense that there's always going to be someone around to help you. So you get in trouble, this must be someone else.
Well,
someone will come and get me.
Of course.
Someone else's problem.
You have an incident, like you do a St. John's first aid.
Yeah.
Everyone should have a bit of first aid. They say, an ambulance is only 5 minutes away. Not where I'm going.
Right.
It's not 5 minutes away,
Yeah.
literally.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's people not understanding the limitations of the environment, but also their own limitations. And as you say, if you've been camping down south, doing the kind of glamping that I'm familiar with, then that's a completely different experience, requiring a completely different kind of preparation to being out in the Kimberley.
The paradigm shifts, and you've just got to move towards that and research it. Yeah.
And what sort of percentage of people do you think actually do the planning that they should do before getting in their four-wheel drive and setting out in wild exploration?
If you talk about quality planning, it's probably only about 10%. Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people, well, see, some people go in numbers, so you get one or two vehicles. Good idea, because then you've got this backup, and that's often what's going to protect them. But if you're going to go solo, then you really need to do your preparation. And I think most of those people, when they go solo, a high percentage of those people do their research.
That's reassuring. If we were to go into some specifics in terms of that planning, I mean, how do you make sure you're going to have enough water, for example?
Well, again, time of the year, like saying Western Australia is quite unique. I do quite a bit of stuff in New Guinea. You don't have to worry about water. Water is everywhere, and it's falling out of the sky all the time. You don't have to walk very far, and you're crossing a stream. Here, that's very different. Now, Indigenous people, really, First Nations people taught me that very quickly in the Pilbara. Water and how far some of these people could go without a drink was. I could not believe how people could do that.
Okay.
So thirst, I have been very thirsty, and thirst is something where you lose your ability to think clearly very quickly, and that's. In a survival situation, it's the lack of water. So it's not finding water, it's how you save the fluids that are in your body and search at a time that's not in the midday sun for any water that's available. So it's preserving what you've got.
Okay.
And if you waste it, you can be dead. You could be dead within 8 to 10 hours. In a hostile environment. So if we take the Pilbara, the Kimberley, at the really hot time, you've got a very short period of time if you don't think about how you expend your energy and when you expend your energy to look for that extra water that you're going to need.
Okay. So have you been in that situation yourself, Terry?
No, I've never put myself in that situation. It's just from a military perspective where you knew that the risk of getting to the water was too great. So you disciplined yourself with your water to the point that I think I probably lost very close, probably 8 to 9% of my body weight lost in just dehydration. And you just can't sleep and those things until, you just don't have the water to be able to quench your thirst.
Right.
So, but survival-wise, that was a different situation to just raw survival.
Mm. So I just want to dig down into that a bit more. So you talked about choosing your moment to look for water. So you're lost, you haven't got any water, it's the middle of the day. What should you be doing?
Okay, if you're on your own, there's a situation where if there's a couple of people there, you really sit down and have a conversation, calm the farm, find some shade, and just have a bit of a chat. So that people need to start talking about how they're feeling, what they've got, and then how do we ration what we've got. So if you find that the temperature, let's just focus on WA because most likely we're going to have temperature and we're going to have a dry environment. And so therefore it's preserving what you have. So reducing your sweat and even reducing how much you may talk. So finding a shady spot and sitting in the shade until the evening comes. Then you've got to actually start to try and understand, well, where can I find water? Now, there's a lot of places that I can go now, and I know I've gone into different areas. I've never walked there before. I'm only carrying a certain amount of water, but I know the geology, and then there are certain plants that will lead you to water. So I've always been able to find water in those areas. And I've done a number of solo walks where that's what you're doing. And when I say solo walks, my testing of myself in the environment is to go into a place that I've never walked before. I would have done a map study, maybe nowadays Google Earth, so you can pick up some of these things. And then when you get on the ground, you need to then find those things that keep yourself going.
Okay, so even if you've never been to the area before, you're going to have a fair sense of what to expect, what it's going to look like, where you might find water if needed.
Yeah, but that comes from more than 40 years of experience. So you don't, I don't believe I could have done that as efficiently as I can now in my 20s because I've accumulated this knowledge to be able to do that.
You can't just use Apple Maps to Google nearest water source.
No, that's right. Or download a little YouTube on finding water.
Right.
You know?
That's how we learn everything now, Terry.
Yes.
I know that you've taught people to live off the land
Yeah.
when needed, when they've needed to. I mean, how long, in terms of food, how long can the average person go without food?
Food, okay. Food can be quite a lengthy period of time, So, but it comes down to physical expenditure. What are you trying to do with regards to finding food? The first thing you've got to understand is if I put myself in a situation, how long do I think I'm going to be there? So the risk of where you go, how remote, etc. Have you told someone where you're going? Have you left information where you are? Like nowadays, you can carry a little EPIRB and stuff like that. So all of those things are fine. So if you're talking about a survival situation, within 4 to 5 days, if you're just living off the land and the military put you through some pretty hard survival courses, you become quite dizzy and disorientated through physical movement because now you've lost any sugars that you can have, any of those sweet things, and it's just not in your diet. So you're actually trying to hunt and find things, but trying to trap things. After about 3 to 4 days, to stand up is probably 4 or 5 minute exercise of slowly standing up so you don't pass out. And then you start walking, and you don't walk very far, and you walk slowly to actually try and do things. Now, once you get to about 10 to 12 days, your physical range is very short. But people can live without food, 25, 30 days. But then you're at end of life there, but you're not doing very much. and you've done everything wrong if you're out in an environment and
25 days later.
And no one's coming for you.
Sure. I suppose we've talked about the dangers of heat, but of course cold is as much a threat to someone who is lost. How do you stay warm? How do you find shelter in that wild environment when you're lost?
Okay, so shelter is the first thing that you're going to do. So it can prevent loss of fluids. So any sort of shelter that you can have, if there's a wind and those sort of things. Again, Indigenous people I've seen where a little scoop in the ground and a little rock wall and then some vegetation to break the wind and those things, and then other people's body heat. But if you've got some layered clothing, well then you're right. But I know you get into Central Australia, you get inland, and it can be, you're getting -2-3 degrees and you're getting a very uncomfortable evening. And then the daytime temperatures can rocket up again. So you've got the Western Australia and I don't like to use the word desert, but we have defined deserts, but we've got deserts here with so much vegetation, flowers and stuff like that no other deserts have. And but we get the extreme of heat and we get the extreme of cold.
One way to ward off the cold, obviously, is to attempt to start a fire. I mean, what's your go-to? What's your suggestion for people if they are attempting to start a fire in the middle of the desert?
Well, if you're going to try and start a fire, you want to have at least 3 different methods that you carry with you to light a fire. Because if you're pulling your bootlaces out and you're trying to rub that's the last. They're skills that you learn, but you never want to test yourself because you've got 3 or 4 other methods of lighting a fire before you get there. But the key thing is most people don't get the right fuels. So they get larger sticks and they're not too sure. There's materials you can pick up that are so fine and flammable that a spark from a flint, like a stone, and when I say a stone, I mean a flint stone, not just banging a couple of rocks together. You can actually get a fire going. But I've seen people try that method for 3 or 4 hours because they're just getting the wrong materials. Again,
right, okay.
It's identifying what materials are in that environment that can actually take the spark. Then the spark will build into a very small flame, and that flame needs to be fed by layers of material. And you often see people get a little bit of stuff, they'll start, it's gone, but they haven't got all these other little things prepared to just keep it going so that you've got that fire going. The great thing, like if people are in a desperate situation, their mental states disappear, it's going south. And when you can get a fire going, that just changes your whole world.
Right, it perks everyone up.
Oh yeah, it's like a tonic, and especially for those, you'll always have one person that's trying to get the fire going. There might be 3 or 4 that are just sitting there going, "Oh, we're doomed," and immediately they change.
Okay,
yeah,
all right, it's good. It's a good morale boosting activity for the entire team.
Yeah, well, there's a sense of empowerment and control that we now got a handle on this. Then there's complications with a whole host of other things, but at least you got the fire going.
It's a very primal thing, really, isn't it? The cavemen starting the fire, for the discovery of fire.
Yes.
Taming the environment, the first step.
Yep.
I suppose one other reason you might light a fire is in the hope of attracting attention. I mean, if we want to think about visibility, what's the best way of making yourself seen by potential rescuers?
I've actually had a personal experience where I was in a helicopter crash.
Really?
Yeah, in the Kimberley. And anyway...
You survived a helicopter crash in the Kimberley?
Yes, the helicopter was completely written off, and I only lost a little bit of skin. Luckily for us, the pilot and myself, we're okay, but there had been 2 other crashes in the previous 6 months, 2 people and 4 people. They were all killed. So we're okay, we hit the ground pretty heavily. The helicopter was completely written off, but before I got in the helicopter, I was actually going out to have an aerial view of an area that I'd never walked through. And I thought, I'll just have a little bit of a look at this rather than just straight in there. And on the way out, the helicopter stopped flying. And but before I got in the helicopter, I fronted up with a little backpack. I had my sat phone, I had my little survival kit, I had my first aid kit, I had my camera and my water bottle. I had a few little things, and the pilot goes, "Well, we've got a long way to go. We're going to have to pull in and pick up some fuel." And he said, "What do you got in your backpack there?" And I said, "Well, sat phone." He said, "No, you won't need to take that because we've got a NOTAM. We can notify people where we're going." And I said, "Well, I've got this EPIRB here." No, we've got one on the aircraft. Leave that behind. I've got my first aid kit. Got one under the seat. Leave that behind. So I climb in the aircraft with a water bottle and my camera.
Right.
And then, bang, we hit the ground. Boom, boom. Luckily, this thing didn't catch on fire. And anyway, I managed to get out and help the pilot out. And he lights up a cigarette straight away, going, "Oh, geez." And I'm thinking, whoa, our EPIRB's still in that aircraft. So we rush in and pull the EPIRB out and set that up.
Yep.
So about 4 hours later, an aircraft came over us. But EPIRBs in those days are not like nowadays they pick up about a 5 metre square. Well,
so
where
can you
you
explain
are.
that? What an EPIRB was?
Well, it's an emergency positioning beacon that hits off a satellite and then goes back to, I think it's Canberra or somewhere like that, and they're notified there's an alarm going off and they can triangulate. And with the type of equipment we had back then, it was about 20 square kilometres. So this plane flew over the top of us, and then it knew it was in the area, came down very low, and then went off to the south. And so it was doing circuits that we could sort of hear it as it came on its northern run. And it'd been there for about 30 minutes. And I said to him, "Look, let's get a fire going," because he was a smoker. So we got the fire going.
Yeah.
And just build up a big wooden fire so we got a lot of heat. And then I just went around and broke all these green branches because that puts up a lot of black smoke. And as we just started to hear the plane, and we pretty much calculated, okay, the plane's coming, fire's going, throw all this vegetation on, and the plane came straight in over the top of us, picked us up straight away, and then a helicopter came out and took us back to town. Yeah.
Amazing. Right.
Yeah.
Not many people can say they've survived a helicopter crash and
Yeah,
then immediately been rescued.
Yeah, that's right. Well, so his preparation with the NOTAM and all of those things mean that someone knew roughly where we're going and all of those things, had some basic technology, and all of that stuff worked for us because the pilot had done the preparation. But I was asked to leave behind my stuff. Yeah,
right.
Which
you wouldn't do that again now.
I'm relaxed. Yeah, no, I'd be
so
very
every time
reluctant.
you get on the plane, you've got your emergency kit with you?
I always have. Yeah, I always carry a little bit of stuff with me. Yeah, I always have a couple of little things. It's no different. Like if I'm walking in New Guinea, I've only just started to use a porter to carry all my own stuff, but I'm very conscious that I need, if the porters disappear and something occurs, and you've got trackers, clients next to you, you've got to have enough stuff with you to be able to treat that situation. Again, I made a number of assessments about how I'd move around in New Guinea because I'd operated up there with the military, and the weather can sock in. And I had a group of clients that wanted to climb on a plane, and I was waiting for that plane to land. And when we got to Kokoda, and anyway, a plane landed with all the luggage, but the clients were all on another aircraft. But that when they couldn't land because of the cloud, it flew into the mountain. They were all killed. And, so my plan was I would never fly in and out of Kokoda. I'd go to another spot, go over the range at 10,000 feet. That was an appreciation that I had done, and I've never allowed that process again. But they were the only two clients. They insisted that they wanted to fly out of Kokoda.
Wow. So
those sort of lessons stay with you, and in the military, you learn some hard lessons, and you don't want to compromise. Yeah.
I was going to ask you if you could give a specific example of how your mindset made the difference between life and death, but you've just given me two, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Which is amazing. It'd be nice to think about, I suppose, when we talk about going out into the bush, we're generally now talking about people going out in four-wheel drives. A lot of West Australians love to take their four-wheel drives out bush. For someone who's planning their first serious off-road trip, and I think we've touched on this a bit, where should they start in terms of planning and preparation to avoid a disaster situation?
That can be challenging because what's actually changing with our urban environment is okay, how far are we going to go before we start our adventure? And with national parks and reserves and private property, there's very few places that you can actually take these vehicles nowadays that are within a comfortable range of a few hours of the city.
Right.
So people are pushing further and further. Now, once you get further and further out, well, then you need to start considering, well, you've got to give yourself enough time. And some people don't allocate enough time, so therefore they're actually probably pushing their vehicle, driving a bit too fast, too hard to get to the area they want to get to. And then when they get there, they feel, well, okay, we got to go back soon. So you've got to calm everything down, especially if you're going out there the first time. I'd always go with someone else that's got the similar interests, so that you've got a backup. And then there's all the basics that you want with your vehicle to be able to make sure that your vehicle keeps going, like spare tyre, extra spare tyre, or an ability to patch a flat tyre. But and you're carrying extra water, you're carrying extra food, but not too much to the point. A lot of people, you see it in the Kimberley and the Pilbara, they've overloaded their vehicle. They overload. You see trailers, axles, bearings collapsing, springs, suspensions breaking, and
right.
Because the terrain is knocking it about, and they've overloaded.
They're prepared too much.
Yeah, that's right. They've got they've prepared too much. So
that's interesting. So just the fact that I guess it's a consequence of four-wheel drive off-roading perhaps becoming more popular, and the population growth, we're just having to go further just to get started.
And that's the challenge. Now, my understanding is Australians per capita have more four-wheel drives than anyone else in the world, and I would assume Western Australia would have even more than Victoria. So if you take Victoria, there's not a lot of four-wheel drive, like good adventure four-wheel driving, where Western Australia has got an abundance of it once you push 4 or 5 hours out of the city, but you have to prepare to go there.
Given how many of us now drive these cars, and many of us never take them out of the city or off-road, given how popular they are, do you think there's a sense that, and I guess this ties in with the idea that perhaps some people plan too much or take too much, that we're just too comfortable in these vehicles and we forget how harsh the environment around them is? So people set out in their lovely air-conditioned Land Rover or whatever, and expect to remain comfortable for the entire trip. But
well, look, my speciality, even though I trained as a motor mechanic, I lived in the bush and was able to repair a lot of things the way my parents, we grew up and stuff in remote areas. But I'd be saying to any person who's got a four-wheel drive and they want to go out, there are a lot of four-wheel drive organisations where you can do tag-along and stuff. And if you're going to go somewhere, a tag-along with someone who knows the area, knows vehicles and all of those things, they help you with your preparation and all those things. Just a sensible way to enter that environment, because we've got such a vast area to explore. And if you've got this vehicle and you've got that sense of adventure and you want to go there, you just need to approach it in the right way. And there are plenty of four-wheel driving schools and places so you start to understand how the vehicle operates or functions and how I can actually use it better for the different type of terrain that I could be going over. Because I suppose the most vulnerable thing you have with your vehicle is your tyres. Now, tyres are generally made to go down a bitumen road, and you might have some off-road tyres, but you've got so many different off-road environments, from sand to rock and different environments. So you have to drive your vehicle a little bit differently. You inflate your tyres a little bit differently for the different terrains. What speed am I doing? People who are really into four-wheel driving and take people out there, as I said, I didn't realise what I was learning from old stockmen and Aboriginal people. You'll go to one of these places, these people know so much. You think you're absorbing everything, but you're probably only taking in about 20%. And it's going to take you a while to accumulate that knowledge for you to venture off just by yourself or with, like, say, some friends into that environment without that extra skilled help from these. I'm reluctant to use the word professional because I think it can be, or expert. It's overused, but you've got people with a good knowledge and good understanding.
Experienced people.
Yeah, experienced people.
Yeah. As safe as you might feel in your vehicle, don't go solo the first time.
Oh, no, no. You'd be crazy. Yeah,
Okay.
crazy to go first time.
What do you think some of the, in terms of things that people get wrong, what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions people have about going off-roading might be? So what are some of the big mistakes people make?
A lot of these modern four-wheel drives, they've got a lot of power. And especially younger people in that, they've probably watched a lot of videos of these wheel-spinning, bucking, jumping vehicles when the right gear and just roll over the terrain very steadily and easily. So people not using the vehicle correctly for the environment they're in. There is an environment, and you've got to look after that environment. And some people, there are people who go through different areas, and they just rip the place up, making it harder and harder for the next vehicle to come through, and that because of the wheel spin and things like that. And that's one of the reasons so many places are being closed and shut down, because people they're not using their vehicle to look after the environment. It's more, they've probably got a few people standing out there with videos and look at me, and that sort of stuff's going on, you know. And I have seen people, a little bit of a competition amongst, you know, I'll get my vehicle up there, and someone, and you go, you got to moderate that because of the location you're in, the risks that could occur. Do that, you know, within 50 kilometres of Perth where you've got a mobile signal. But when you're out in these places, you've got to moderate that whole behaviour. Now, I would say probably 95% of the population do that. But you've always I've spent more time assisting people who've done the wrong thing. You never have to assist someone who's done all the right things because they're not parked up on the side of the road or blocking a track because something's gone wrong.
Right, okay. Again, it's that sense that people feel so safe in their vehicles that they will do incredibly risky things.
Well, they feel, like you're saying, they feel safe, and they've seen these videos, and they haven't accessed experienced people and gone to these places to learn. You know, baby steps. You know, you crawl before you get up and start to take little, and that's what it is. It's incremental, just accumulating this knowledge and expanding your horizons of what your adventure is going to be.
They're not actually enjoying being in the environment they're in or giving that environment the respect it deserves. It's, again, just this slightly more perhaps selfish approach to just, I'm going to take my big machine out there and do some cool stuff.
Yeah, look, you make me think of an advert for a four-wheel drive where they're talking about this magnificent vehicle, mum and dad and the kids in the back and driving out there, and the kids in the back are looking at a video screen. And I'm going, whoa, you know, like what? Yeah, so you get these mixed messages like, yeah, beautiful to drive out there and do that, but if you're going out into these places, you want to enjoy that environment and not be distracted by, you know, I suppose the sound machine that you might have, and you know, they say you want to be reading your environment, listening to your vehicle, and moderating everything so that you're just at one with the environment, not this noisy. Because that's where the risks come of something occurring, and that's when incidents. Now someone has to go and help that person get out of there,
right? Or
the other members of their party have to help them and get back, and that's potentially we do have situations where people die in our environment, and WA has an environment equal to South Australia and the Northern Territory and parts of Queensland. It's a hostile environment that's often experienced by adventurous foreign tourists in often inappropriate vehicles, going on a real adventure before they even understand what they need to know to be able to look after themselves.
Right.
Yeah. So we do have too many incidents where people have died out in these environments.
Through lack of preparation, lack of understanding of what the adventure is going to entail.
That's correct, yeah.
I suppose if we're thinking about that then and we wanted to break it down, what is one essential bit of kit that no four-wheel driver should leave home without?
Before I do that, I would say you need to let people know what you're going to do and where you're going to go. So it's not the kit, it's how you tell your story. This is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to go.
Communication.
Yes, exactly. So there is someone back here, because you can take all this kit, but if bits of it start to fail, then your rescue is coming from here. You said you were going to be at this place at this time, and so that's your absolute backup. So if you're going out there now, most vehicles, like the technology they've got in these vehicles and that now, but I would say they're great little handheld GPS devices that you can actually communicate with now, so through your mobile phone. But the latest mobile phones now satellite connect. So when you back up and you think, well, okay, I've got this bit of technology, you talk about a vehicle, but if I leave my vehicle and I trust this, well, how long's the battery going to last? Have I got an ability to charge it should something happen so that I can still communicate? Because you can rely on something, but if you don't back up that something in these other little circumstances, so it just keeps on compounding until, hold on, I'm now in a survival situation because I didn't prepare.
Right. I did want to ask about that. So if you say you have planned, you've done everything right, your vehicle breaks down, do you leave the vehicle? Do you stay with the vehicle? What's the first step?
Yeah, well, the vehicle is the most obvious thing that can be seen from the air. And so too often people have left their vehicles, and that's when complications start with regards to all the other risks because of the environment that they're in. Mm-hmm. So you should never leave your vehicle. You stay with it, because if your equipment has failed to be able to say, this is where we are, if you've left a plan, then people will say they're on this road or this track, they're going in this area. Aerial search can find people very quickly, but if they find an empty vehicle, now the search becomes even more complicated.
Why do people leave the vehicle?
Okay, that is a good question. Now, I've read a number of stories. I remember two young guys on a station in the Kimberley back in the 80s, Amos and Arnett or something like that. They were legging it away from quite a brutal stockman, and they stole a vehicle, but it didn't have a four-wheel drive. So they got bogged and thought, okay, there's water. We saw a windmill back there, so we'll walk back to the windmill. They got bogged sort of midday, and before sunset they were dead because they didn't have water with them. So a lot of people go, well, I remember that back there, but they may not remember how far, because we're sitting in a vehicle driving. But once you get out and get on your feet, and then this is the environment, did you pick a bad time to leave your vehicle? Stay with your vehicle. If you're going to walk, you need to be able to leave a message and do it at night, so that if they find your vehicle, they know what direction you're going in, what your intentions are. You just have to think of plan B, and then plan B has a plan C, and a plan C has a plan D.
Are there common mistakes people make when panic sets in, when just that realization that I'm out here, there's no one coming to help me, I'm stuck, I've got to do something? Yeah,
anxiety. Yeah, look, that doesn't give you, that filters good, clear thinking and building a logical plan. Yeah, so that's why, when something occurs, you can have a fairly strong individual who might be having a level of anxiety is trying to say, this is what we've got to do. When, don't do anything. Just calm the farms, sit down, have a chat, and start discussing things. But bring the tempo down rather than someone trying to force a solution at probably the worst possible time.
Aside from leaving the vehicle when clearly they should stay with it, what are some other common mistakes people make that turns a manageable situation into a dangerous one?
Probably the first one that I can think of is that if someone wants to light a fire, well, you want to be far enough away from your vehicle, and also what other vegetation is around. I've seen people light a fire and then half the bush is on fire.
Well,
you know.
it's one way of getting attention, I suppose.
Well, it can be, yeah. So just that simple thing, because if you've got a vehicle, you're going to be able to get a fire going because you've got some means to do that. But where your vehicle's stuck and probably what is good shade, shelter, those things, there might be a compromise that you can't move the vehicle, but this is the perfect spot to be. I will light a fire here. And then you just make your whole world even worse. That's why sit down, think about things. How are we going to approach this? Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's leave our four-wheel drive behind. So we think about hiking. Obviously, it's another reason people go out into the wilderness. And you're an experienced hiker yourself. For those who are setting out on bushwalks for the first time and going to remote areas, and I know we've touched on this a bit, but what extra planning and preparation should they be making if they're used to hiking in the southwest, for example?
Yeah, okay. So a lot of hiking in the southwest, a lot of people go and walk, say, the Bibbulmun Track or the Cape to Cape. If you're going to go somewhere that is untracked, or what they term as trackless, they have a grading system from 1 to 6, basically, and remote trackless is that you're not walking the Bibbulmun Track. So some people accumulate a certain amount of experience in that environment, then try and transpose that into this other environment. And but first up, that plan about letting people know what you're doing, where you're going, those sorts of things. And then when you start off, it's like, how much am I going to carry? What sort of equipment that I've got, especially the emergency side. Now, technology today, it is very small, very simple, but you've got to keep it charged. So therefore, what's my backup to keep that going? The thing is, I've always had to control the number of people who want to access. Everyone's got to ring home. They've got to tell someone about something, or they've got to be contacted. And I'm often now carrying 2 battery packs to be able to just accommodate some of the needs that people feel they need.
Right.
Which is, well, I think some days we can go somewhere for 5 days and don't have to talk home, talk to someone home. But that need, so you've got to make sure you've got the battery capacity.
Right, so you're carrying extra batteries around for these people addicted to their devices, to being connected.
Yeah, well, I have people come to me and saying, look, you've got a battery, can I charge my phone? Because they're doing something on their phone overnight and the battery runs out. And I'm going, well, my phone is, I'm linked to a satellite with it. Yeah. It's for emergency and the battery's for that. So I'm having to say no. That's what that's for. But people don't think of that. They've got this device. They use it, and So that's the first one. So you've got to make sure your ability to call for assistance, mainly because someone can turn an ankle. Some incident could occur where you may have to get helicopter evacuation or something like that. Right. So that's why that device has to work, and you've got to have a backup to that. And then, like with that backup, I always waterproof it. Then I waterproof it a second time. And not everything's in one bag. It's all separate. So you've got all these different ways of making sure that this thing's not going to fail on me.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've just finished another Kokoda crossing.
Yes. Yeah.
Are there lessons from the Kokoda track that are applicable to WA, or is it really a unique environment that we have here?
Look, it's a completely different environment, but it's like any environment. You have to pace yourself. You've got to be realistic. If you're going into that environment, you want to enjoy it. And, I'll give you Kokoda. Most people walk Kokoda between 7 and 9 days. It's 96 kilometres, and you're up and down steep elevation. So how you expend your energy on the first couple of days to get through to the back end. So a lot of people have maybe something wrong with their knee or something wrong with their ankle. So you go, okay, well, we're going to move through this environment, so we've got to look after those things, so our pace and where we get to, enjoy, kick back, rest. And sometimes people think, well, we could be walking more, but we're sitting down and resting. Well, accumulatively, you know what you're going to get people through. That's Kokoda. Here, it's the temperature. So I'm normally trying to get people up 4 a.m, pack up in the dark, and those things. You get prep. You're walking at first light, and you try and stop by midday. and in a beautiful spot where you can kick back, relax, listen to things and, the environment. But you've actually knocked over what you want. You're going to recover, but you get out of that, the heat, the sun. Now, I don't do things in the Kimberley during the build-up. Like come the end of, the beginning of September, you just don't go there. It starts to get too hot and it would be too dangerous. Although, if you're experienced, people go out in that environment and they manage it. There's a lot of people up in the Kimberley that go out during the wet and that, when other people will say, you should never go out that time, but the waterfalls are spectacular and, it's the environment. Yeah, but, you just got to pick your time and how you do it.
Is it all about picking your time, though? Because as you say, people do go out there at different times. I mean, how do you, if you are out in the Kimberley, where the weather can turn quickly, where the terrain is unpredictable, do you have advice for how you would read that situation, how you can read the coming change in the weather?
The Kimberley, I would say the weather doesn't change quickly, mainly because you've got that dry season and you can, it's like, Chopper Reed's weather report. I don't know whether you've ever seen that.
No.
Darwin.
It's passed me by.
Yeah, right. Darwin and Alice Springs. Well, the thing is there that it's consistent. However, when you step outside of what is the tourist time to go, then your preparation is very, very different to going into that environment. Now, I've taken corporate executives into a trekking environment with regards to leadership, and the whole purpose of me doing that is that they can't control the temperature, the light, and there's this environment that can fill up with water and stuff like that, and watch how they approach it. And now their learning curve is just extremely quick because they're leaders and they can often push themselves too hard and too fast. And I've had situations where I've had to say, stop, over here, sit in the water, because an individual is now moving towards heat illness that could be fatal. And that's because people are not observing each other and people just keep it within and try and hang in there, and yet we're getting into this really bad space. Now, the hostile environment, like the wet season, is a great time to do that, but you've really got to watch the group, manage the group. I had one group one time when we had so much rain that came down that the way the rivers came up, I said, okay, what's your plan? How are you going to get out of here? Oh, we'll go down here and cross here. And I went, I think we need to think about that one there, because the volume of water that was going to be moving through there, because you can read the map, see all these streams coming in and go, look at that stream now, there's going to be a lot more water there. So it was develop a strategy, smaller stream, and we had to walk further. But once they got that understanding, we got out. But if I wasn't there, but admittedly they were only there because I was there, but that was for them to learn and appreciate that environment. Now that's when, like I'll say to you, when people go out in four-wheel drives, go with someone experienced. They can teach you that stuff. The first time you go walking in some of these environments, especially when it becomes trackless, and it's not a managed environment, that the national parks. Now the national parks and these reserves, they've got everything designed so that people can go out and enjoy themselves. It's probably over-designed a little bit because people just don't think really.
They just trust that it's going to be okay.
Well, it works. They go out and they walk and they walk and walk, and then they go, oh, we'll go and do this. But they've been conditioned to this, but their mindset is not ready to approach that unless they put themselves in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing.
Okay. Well, if they do that and then wander off the beaten track, as it were, and find themselves lost, when you realise you're lost, what's the first thing you should do?
Now, you're talking about being on your own or a little group? Because, see, the thing is that you should never go there on your own, okay, especially when you're hiking.
But I would imagine you can still get lost as a small group.
Oh, you can.
Yes.
You can. And, term it as geographically embarrassed, because loss is a...
Okay.
Yeah. So,
temporarily misled.
That's right. Yeah. So with modern technology, people just push a button, there we are, and that. But I did have a group in the Kimberley that I allocated to an area, and I said, here's your maps, this is what you're going to do. Should something occur, and I knew that something was going to develop because of the physical condition of one of the participants. And I said, look, here's an emergency airstrip here. However, people had this technology, but they didn't know how to use it. Here's a grid reference. The grid reference came in lat and long, but here's the map. They didn't know how to read the lat and long off the side of the map, and it's in a grid form. So next thing you know, I'm on a sat phone trying to find out where they are, calm the farm. Okay, describe what's around you, like how far, where did you camp? Bang. Okay, I've got a rough idea where you are, and then I sent a helicopter out and started picking them up, because they themselves, even though they were experienced and knowledgeable, they had a bit of kit that they didn't know how to use properly.
Right.
Mm.
When was the last time you were, geographically mislaid? Geographically embarrassed.
Look,
yes.
You can, when I go into an unknown area, and I do that less and less nowadays, you don't have to go very far, and you go, oh, hang on, and you feel this level of anxiety. Stop, get the map out, have a bit of a look, because I'm very much a person on a map. I don't rely on the technology, because batteries, and I had a situation with the American military where everything was battery. When the batteries failed, whoa, this thing turned really bad, because they didn't know how to read maps and that. But right. I can walk off into an area, especially if it's dense like jungle. You don't have to go. You only have to go a kilometre, 1,500 metres, and then you start questioning yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start questioning yourself, you can feel this negative energy within, and you go, I've got to calm that, sit down, and then, okay, let's backtrack till I know I'm at a point. And then I go, why didn't I concentrate on the small detail? Because you're just walking along going, oh, I've got a handle on this, I'm pretty, yeah. And then you go, and you've got to be humble.
Okay.
Say, and I've still, those things still occur to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting. So much of what you've talked about, it comes back to that mindset of just calming down, calm the farm, as you say.
Yeah.
Resisting the impulse to panic and make poor decisions. I mean, that seems to be the number one lesson I'm taking from this conversation.
You've got to be in a relaxed state to be able to make, understand your situation, and then make a decision about how you're going to get yourself out of it. Mm.
It's interesting how appealing these skills are becoming to people, I guess. Perhaps as we get more comfortable, as we become more urbanised, there does seem to have been a resurgence of interest in bushcraft and specialist or survival skills. Why do you think people are increasingly seeking out this kind of knowledge?
Well, the first thing is that I think our society should encourage an adventurous spirit. Okay, that's just should be something that we should be teaching everyone, is to have that conscious, adventurous mindset, with a caveat that it's how we start to prepare and do that. Now, WA, we've got such a magnificent, vast area. The opportunity is our back door. We can go there. We can go anywhere in the world, because we've got the capability with our income capacity and life to go and have these adventures. But our backyard is also very dangerous, but I think people are testing themselves. That's what I did as a young person, even though I was in this environment and doing different things. As a young person, you want to test yourself, and then as you start to test yourself, you get a taste and a fever for that adventure. To be there in that space and doing those things. But it's also a space that's being more controlled and less. But as I mentioned, if you take the world, Western Australia's got so much outdoor space, remote wilderness space of a variety that's quite broad. Yeah.
Apart from the scenery and apart from the sense of safety in the wilderness, what personal or psychological benefits do you think people find from bushcraft, find from testing themselves, from discovering that spirit of adventure?
You made a comment, the primeval aspect of a fire, sitting around a fire. We don't get that in an urban environment, and there's all this other light, and there is something that's in our DNA. When we sit in a dark location, we can see the stars, we've got a little bit of a fire, and there's this space. We start to ask a lot of questions of ourselves, and then probably look at how do we start to test our ability to move in that place and feel that we can manage it in a safe way. And I think that's in every one of us, as I mentioned earlier. I reckon I was born 300 years too late, but we are who we are, where we are at this time. And a lot of people have that within them. And yeah, there's a great space to go and do that.
I find that quite inspiring. I'm sure many other people will as well. If someone is inspired by this conversation and wants to get out there, are there particular courses, particular experiences in WA that you would recommend?
Oh, look, if we talk about 4-wheel drives, there's a host of people, and I would say those tag along. If you've got a vehicle and there's tag along, there's some magnificent long journeys like the Canning Stock Route, and there's all these different places. So it's just Google that space. And again, if you're going to go walking, because vehicle can cover a lot of country, there's people in the urban environment that sell these trips out in those places. When it comes to walking in remote locations, you need to look more into those remote areas and just Google and find out who's doing stuff in those places. We've got a lot of walks like people talk about. I hear a lot of people they'll say, "Oh, Central Australia, the Larapinta Walk and stuff like that." Well, the Larapinta Walk is a hard structured tourist walk, and but it's a bit like the Bibbulmun, but on steroids. Okay, so it's hard. So you can go out there and do that, and there are people that assist you, and they can take your backpack, or they'll meet you halfway and give you a resupply and those sorts of things. To break from the defined trails that are set up, tourist so-called trails, like there's every state's got these great walks, but to get into that remote wilderness trackless, you really need to find someone that's actually managing that space and go on a trek and then learn from them so that you can actually start doing that yourself.
Okay. Well, finally then, for someone who is wanting to go and start doing that themselves, what's the one bit of advice you'd give to someone before they set off in their 4-wheel drive or before they set off on one of these hikes?
Well, it's that preparation. Yeah, that 7P principle. It's good research, before you go. And, 4-wheel drive's one thing that can assist people who may have a series of disabilities or they've got limitations, especially older people. So if you're going to be doing something physical, it's like I had some number of people on Kokoda, and I'll say to every person, get a personal porter, to carry a backpack. You carry a lightweight. That just means you're less likely to get an injury. Now, I've done 24 crossings, and I've got 100% of getting everyone across. But if someone's got to be evacuated, it's about $10,000 to get a helicopter to get you out, So, but if you go into the Kimberley and or other remote walks that are trackless, well, one, you want to have insurance for that helicopter extraction. Then we've got the RFDS, the Royal Flying Doctor Service. Once they get you to a location, if you've got to go somewhere else, then that service will look after you there. But you don't want to call on them. You should be making sure that if I've got an injury and my expectations are unrealistic, well, how much weight can I carry in a very remote area and those things. So, that's humble. I'm now starting to ask, like I'm in my 70s now, and I'm going, okay, I've got to take less weight, and when do I have to start pulling back?
And becoming aware of your new limitations. Is that what you're saying, Terry?
Yes. I'm still got vitality.
Yeah.
But I've got to have a chat to the ego.
Okay.
To make sure that I moderate. So I just don't. It would be so embarrassing if someone had to come and rescue me with my reputation.
It would.
Yes.
So that's your one-word bit of advice is just humble.
Humble. Oh, yeah. Look, approach it from a humble perspective, but broaden your research so that your paradigm is not in an echo chamber. You know, get out of that echo, because everyone's in an echo chamber. Just open it up.
Terry, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. No, Mike, appreciate the conversation.
Thank you for tuning in. If you liked this episode, let us know and share it with a friend. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next episode of RAC's Horizons podcast.